الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى ما بعد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So as I hear, Friday night is tafsir night. You know, people have bingo night, so I guess in IIGD, Friday night is tafsir night. So in keeping with that theme, I thought that we talk about a particular surah of the Quran. And so today we're going to actually talk about a very short surah of the Quran. It's only a few ayat, but the meanings are so deep that it really astounds an individual. And I actually didn't really realize how deep the meanings were until I was sort of collating some of these points while I was on the flight here. And it became like almost like 2-3 hours bayan. I said they're going to die if I go through all this material. Right? So, and it's 3 ayahs. Right? The Quran is like that. Tibyana bi kulli shay. It elucidates everything. That even though it seems that it is confined in terms of its physical existence, its meanings are, it's kalamullah, right? It emanates from someone who has no had, who has no end, who has no limits. So the surah that we're actually going to talk about today is Surah Al-Asr. Surah Al-Asr. Very short surah. For many people, it's one of their favorite surah because it's the express salah. Right? So you just, what is the fastest, shortest surah that I can find in the Quran? When you do alim course, it's, sometimes a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? Sometimes a lot of knowledge is a dangerous thing, because the shaitan of an alim is also an alim. So you always look for the loopholes. You become like a legal jurist. So lawyers are known for looking for loopholes. And I'm sometimes still astonished when you have people who make $500 million and they pay less. They're in lower tax bracket than people who are making $50,000. How is that possible? Right? How does that happen? Actually, I had to read on it one time because I was really intrigued. How do you do that, right? But I guess there's different tax codes for capital gains and whatnot. In any case, so you think that you have to read at least 3 ayahs, right, or one long ayah. What are the smallest 3 ayahs that you can find in the Quran? So you're thinking, one najmi idha hawa, right? One najmi idha hawa, or is it wattur wa kidabun mastur fi raqin manshur? Right, so you're trying to find the shortest ayahs so that you get on the train, right? Express style. It's like a drive-by, right? It just happens to be a drive-by in the Salah. And it's, sometimes it's really amazing when you think about how we think and the decisions that we sort of make. Because when you're choosing what to read and how to pray your Salah, no matter how fast, right, you try to read Surah Fatiha, right, there's only a certain limit of how fast you can read it. Even if you're a hafiz, even if you're a super hafiz, right, even if you're the kid who read the fastest in the madrasa, I challenge you, if I were to take the timer and have that person read Surah Fatiha and take another person and read Fatiha, how much of an actual time difference it would actually make? Not that much. And if you were to time a person who's rushing through their salah, and the classic thing is, I'm busy, right? I have so many things to do, and it really strikes an individual because the person will say, I'm so busy. They pray salah quickly. They're getting out of the masjid. They catch their friend. Hey man, what's up? Assalamu alaikum. What's going on? They're talking for 2-3 minutes. Those are the 2-3 minutes that just you lost in your salah. Right? Actually, you'll sit there for half an hour sometimes, and you just don't know where the time went. The real thing is not that you're too busy. The real thing is not that the real thing is not that we have too many things on our plate that we can't make time for salah. The idea is just that our heart's not in it. I was just talking to one of my co-fellows this morning, and we were just talking about how people tend to put off things that they don't want to do. You have to get an oil change, right? You know it's like 5,000 miles. You're like, maybe I can push it to 5,500. And then it gets 6,000. You're like, I know I really need to get to do it, but I have so many things to do. And you keep on pushing the envelope, because if there's something that you don't really want to do, then you sort of put it off. And if you're involved in something that you're not really enjoying, then you try to get through it as fast as possible. And sadly, sometimes that's our affair when it comes to the Salah, is that it's something that is just rushed. You know, sometimes the secret in Salah is not necessarily reading a half an hour of Salah. There's a certain amount of time that you're going to spend in Salah. It's not necessarily extending the time, it's just making the time that you spend in account. I mean, you're going to pay, the difference is between 5 minutes and 6 minutes, really. You know, if you read your tahiyyat fast and you don't read your tahiyyat fast. But you know, it's just the question is, in those 5 or 6 minutes, where are you? Are you there, or are you somewhere else? Is your heart in it, or is your heart somewhere else? And if that makes all the difference. Right? That's the difference between making a mi'raj to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making a mi'raj to China, and he does that in the other. You know, maybe people think about China, and there's people who think about the most ajeeb things in Salah, right? There's a good anecdote about that, but then it will become a 4-hour bayan, so we'll skip it. The sad thing about, and this is just an aside, it's not really about Surah Al-Asr, but the sad thing about rushing through any type of Salah is not only that you miss out on the Salah, but think about if you were on the other side of that conversation. But really, when you pray your Salah, it's a conversation between, it's an interchange between a person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? When you're saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, my slave has, done my hamd, so on and so forth. It's going that majjadani abdi, so on and so forth. Throughout the thing, there's an exchange. You're saying something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding back. And this exchange is going on. If you've ever been involved in a conversation with someone where the other person is disinterested, you don't very much feel like speaking to the other party. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hilm, it is only His rahmah, it is only His karam, that He'll take hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people who day and night, right, pray in such a way that are in complete ghafla for Him, and He still gives them another chance and invites them back into His house. Only Allah could do something like that. In fact, there's so many people that they even get invited to this very special occasion to have a very special meeting with someone who is more grand than anyone who exists on the face of the earth. And people completely blow it off. They write it off. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't worry about it. He calls those same people to the haram. Okay? He calls those same people to Medina to visit Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's only the karam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't see that type of hilm. It's beyond no person's imaginations. We don't function like that. So in this particular surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by taking what we call a qasam. So no, we're used to, when we take a qasam, people usually take a qasam with Allah, wallahi, billahi, tallahi, that, by God, such and such. And that's the way that we really, if you want to really convince someone of something, that's the way you really get them to believe in you, right? Even my kids know that, right? If the other party doesn't believe them, they'll be like, what, you want me to say wallahi? Right? You want me to say wallahi? Because that's the way that you can really convince someone, because no one would mess with that. You can't invoke God's name and then just lie about it. No one would do something like that. Now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath, it's not because He's taking an oath of someone more grand than Himself, because there's no one who's more grand than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's to draw a person's attention to something which is particular, something which is important in that particular aspect. And in this particular surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to draw our attention to the importance of time. Note that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say one waqt. He didn't say by time. Waqt is also time. He said one asr. Asr is a very peculiar word because it denotes time, but it denotes time that is losing itself. It denotes time that is losing itself. And after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes this qasam, there's something that comes after that is what we call jawabul qasam. That when you take an oath about something. Wallahi, I didn't go to, I don't know what store here you have here. the store here? Grocery store. Huh? Myers. Wallahi, I didn't go to Meyer. So, I didn't go to Meyer, over here would be Jawab al-Qasam. Now, one of the things in Balagha is that when you take a qasam with something, there generally should be some munasabah between the thing that you're taking qasam of and the thing that you're taking qasam about. Right? In this particular situation, it's pretty bad qasam, because what's the munasabah between Meyer and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? But over here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking some type of qasam, there should be some munasabah between the thing that he's taking a qasam with, in this particular situation time. And what is jawab al-qasam? Over here, indeed man is in a state of loss, right? Utter loss, patent loss, open loss. So there's two interpretations of this. One way that you can look at this is there's a descriptive statement. Right? It's a factual statement that if you look at history, and you look at those individuals, those people who walked on the face of the earth, who didn't imbibe within themselves the attributes which are delineated following this jawab al-qasam, that amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. People who didn't do that, right? They just sort of lived it up, and then if you look back at their life, then time itself is a witness that those guys are total losers. Total losers. What did you get out of it? I attended this one leadership training seminar, and it's a very dynamic individual. Some of these, these motivational speakers, and he does this lead training throughout the world, perhaps. Very dynamic individual, but he had this one slide that really stuck with me. And the slide said that the saddest word in any language is "what if." And really, when you come at the end of your life and you look back, that regret that you have at that point, right, when there's nothing ahead of you and everything is behind you, and you see that it's completely empty, it's completely worthless. You say, what did I do with my life? I had a friend who, alhamdulillah, gave him tawfiq, he became a scholar. His father was he was a physician, and he was in one of those, high intensity specialties. So one day, it came at one point in time, much later in life, that he actually broke his arm. And because he broke his arm, he wasn't able to work. I don't know if he did interventional, but so when he broke his arm, he couldn't work. And so he was talking to my dad, they're old family friends. And he said, no, Mazhar Bhai, I tell you, after 30 years, I find myself, this is the first time that I got actually a chance to stop and to think. So busy every day, one day bleeding into the next, one day bleeding into the next, just don't know where time is going, what is happening. It's just like madness. And then all of a sudden everything quiets down, and then you take one look back, and you're like, what happened? Right? The parties are gone, the friends are gone, the gals are gone, the money is gone, the fun is gone. You're in this house by yourself, all alone, with only your tears as solace. That is the saddest word in any language. And that's something, right, that even if you had all the money in the world and you were to spend it, you cannot recover the 1 second that just passed. It's just over. It's the nature of the beast. So that's one aspect of one way to look at this, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, that indeed, when time, if you look in terms of time, time will tell you, right, that man is in a state of patent loss. The other way that you can sort of think about this is a little bit more abstract. If you look at a human being has a consciousness, right, which is this I, this persona of an I. Ergo, what is it? Ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum. Into the Descartes style. So there's consciousness exists. And whether this consciousness exists associated with the body or disassociated with the body, this consciousness in some way exists. And every action associated with this consciousness, every act associated with this consciousness, every feeling associated with this consciousness, every situation associated with this consciousness, by and large, occurs in the context of time. You can't escape it, right? A person is bound by his space-time context. Like the only being you could say that is exempt from time is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's actually a very simple way. I mean, when I was young, it was very hard for me to think, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not have a beginning and how can He not have an end? He's both azali and abadi. So how can He not have a beginning? He's beginningless and He's endless. It just wouldn't make sense to him. But when you talk about terms like this, like beginning and end, these imply valence with regards to time, right? So you have a reference point, and then you have beginning of something or an end of something. These are all time. So how can the creator of time be bound by that thing that He Himself created? Right? There's no had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not bound by His creation. He's not bound by the 6 jihad, and He's not bound by time. That's just Allah. So if you think about this, that a human being exists within the confines or this context of time, then a person realizes that time itself is losing itself. Time itself is entropic, right, in physical terms. And if a person exists within the context of time, the similitude is like that of a person with a certain amount of capital, and the person is losing capital. And the idea is that that capital is slipping through a person's fingers and they need to make a profitable investment before they lose their capital. Easy way to understand it would be to think about an ice seller. Right? You take a bag of ice and you go stand out on a hot day. You better sell that bag of ice quickly, right? Or else you'll have nothing to sell. Right? You'll have nothing to sell. In the same way, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every second that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, every minute that He gives us, is a piece of ice. And you better invest it somewhere, right? So that someone can take it and put it in the fridge for you. وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُم مِّن خَيْرٍ تَجِدُوهُ عِندَ اللَّهِ. Put it away for you so that it's frozen and preserved, or else you just lose it. It's gone. And you can't make any profit. You lose it, it's gone. The very same situation is the similitude of an individual who is كُلٌّ يَغْدُو باعٍ نفسه فمعتقها أو موبقها أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And each one of you, he wakes up and he's a businessman, right? And either he sets himself free or he destroys himself. Right? You're doing business. People don't realize it, right? You're not a physician. You're not an engineer. You're not an IT professional. The first thing that you are is you're a human being. And you're playing and you're trading in your life. Right? That's your first job. The person doesn't realize that whether you sign up for it or not, whether you interviewed for it or not, whether you just have it, that's your job. Right? You're wheeling and dealing every single day. Another way to sort of think about this, a simple way, right? Takeaway point. And the reason I chose Wal Asr is because people also read in Salah, maybe some of these points will also stick. That when you read it, maybe you can remember in our Salah. And, sometimes it helps, right? It really helps. There's a reason that we pray 5 times a day, because it's supposed to reset us. So maybe something like this will stick. What was I saying? Oh, the similitude of a nice analogy to think about it is, imagine, so I just got off the plane. So it's just like being on a plane. Right? One of the things that, so you get on a plane. When you're on a plane, and sometimes I should actually think about the same thing with an elevator, right? Because when the elevator starts going down, I used to think if I jump, then am I no longer part of the system, and at what rate am I accelerating? And think about these types of things. Sometimes I'd actually jump in the elevator to try it out and do my own personal experiment when no one is in the elevator. So same thing though, but when you find out that when you're in an elevator, you're in an elevator. Right? You're initially moving at the same velocity as the elevator, and then that forms your point of reference. Same thing, when you're in a plane, you're in a plane. You're not outside the plane, you're in the plane. You're moving at the speed or the same velocity that the plane is moving. And no matter what you want to do, you're sort of bound by the confines of that plane. The very same way, no matter what you want to do, a person is also bound by the confines of time. It just so happens that this plane is going down. Right? This plane is crashing. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. It's going down and there's no pilot. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no pilot, but there's no pilot on earth, right, that can turn the plane up. It's just going to go down. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Don't have a choice. It's going down. Now what do? If you stay on the plane, you're going to crash and burn, as they say. So the first thing that you want to do is that you remember, man, I should have paid attention to the safety thing that they do in the beginning. Right? Because no one pays attention to that. Actually, you shouldn't pay attention to the safety thing that they do in the beginning, because there's no reason for you to look at that kind of stuff. You can read about it or something, right? But there's ghayr mahram, these people who are demonstrating these type of things. But the idea is that every plane comes equipped with these chutes. Right? So when it lands, for example, if you land at sea, it has these doors. You open the doors, and these yellow chutes come out. Right? These slides come out that you can escape and get off the plane. Right? That you can get off the plane. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created 4 different chutes to get off the plane that's crashing. Right? 4 different chutes. And if you jump on these chutes, you can get off, you can slide off the plane, and save your eternal self. Because this consciousness, while it does have a beginning, in one way it doesn't have an end. Right? It changes forms, it changes states of being. Sometimes it's in this world, sometimes it's in alam al-arwah, sometimes it's in barzakh, sometimes it's on the day of Qiyamah, sometimes it's giving hisab, sometimes it's going to be on the full sirat, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make us amongst them that it may be in Jannah. But it doesn't cease to be, right? It sort of is. You can think of it in that sense. It's transitioning from stage to stage. And so death is a transition from this stage into this next stage of its existence. So the first way that you get off the plane, or one way that you can get off the plane, is with your iman. When قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever says La ilaha illallah, they will enter into Jannah. And Jannah is خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. This is something which is forever. The riwayah comes in the Sahih of Imam Bukhari, that when the last person enters into Jannah, and the last person of Jahannam enters into Jahannam, then death will be brought form in the form of a ram, and it will be sacrificed, and joy will be added to the people of Ahlul Jannah, and despair will be added to the people of Jahannam. أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is sort of like eternal life. And the way that you get out of it, right, so off this crashing plane, is by iman. Iman, in one way, immortalizes the individual. Now, many people feel that Islam or iman is their birthright. Because I was born with iman, I'm going to die with iman. The fact that a person was born with iman, or the person lives with iman, has no bearing on a person dying with iman. These are 2 different things. And that's why a person should always be very careful and very fearful, and they make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them khatam ala iman. I'm reminded of the story of Jibreel ala asdari Kaaba, right, holding on to the Kaaba, right, beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, La tughayyir ismi wa la tubaddil jismi. This is a being that never disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not change my name, right? Do not change my name to something else, and do not change my being into something else, because it is not beyond the majesty of Allah, the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the makar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to change anyone into anything. La yas'alu amma yaf'alu wa hum yus'alun. He's completely ghani. He has samadiyya. There's no one to ask him. He does what he wants, how he wants, what he wants, in his complete wisdom. There's no one to ask him. So if he would want to change Jibreel alayhi salam into some completely other being, he could do it and he would be completely justified. Right? And that fear was enough to overtake Jibreel alayhi salam. Right? And most of us are much less angelic than Jibreel. So if he feared upon himself, then how should we approach this? My teacher gave a very nice example one time in i'tikaf about how to think about iman. He said, think about it like football. Right? You take the football, And when you're playing football, you're trying to make it to the end zone. So you take the football and you tuck it into yourself as tight and close to yourself as possible, because you don't want to fumble. And there's all these people around you trying to strip the ball from you. Right? That's their job. They either want to take you down so you don't make it to the end zone, or they want to strip the ball from you. Right? There's shayateen al-ins, there's shayateen al-jinn, there's nafs, there's all these people behind you. But what you got to do is you got to take that football, you got to dodge everyone, right? You got to have the moves, and you got to make it to the end zone. Right? There's no guarantee you'll make it, right? But you got to try your best. And that's the way that we live. That we take our iman, we tuck it in, and we run for our life. Right? And the perfect day, the happy day, the day of glory, right, will be the day that we score a touchdown. That's the real touchdown. That you die and you have the kalima on your tongue. It comes in hadith that there will be a time where people will be holding on to faith, will be like holding on to hot coal. And that people will wake up a mu'min and they'll go to sleep as a kafir. People think that, how is that possible? But I tell you, you really go out in the world and you see what's going on out there. People go ajib khayalat. Right? People who are alim, people who have studied deen, people who have worked on themselves. They're just walking one day and some weird thought comes in. And then they feel like their iman is, I get these calls from people born in Muslim households. They're like, I'm worried about my iman. Right? Where does it come from? Right? Shak and then argument, and I don't understand this. I was sitting in this one, it just sometimes takes one sentence from your college professor that, religion is dogma. That's it. Person's iman down the drain. Right? Entire class's iman down the drain. It took one, I sat with this, I used to go to, in undergrad, I took a class on Joyce and postmodernism. Not people know about Joyce, but he was actually a Joyce scholar. That's what he was. He specialized in Joyce. James Joyce is one of the literary geniuses, right, of modern times. Very difficult works. And so we had to write these papers, and I tried to write my paper on Islam and postmodernism or something like this. And so when he came, you're young and you have Josh, and it's like you want to give dawah to everyone, right? Which is the way you should be, but we lose this Josh. So he came, and then I gave him a paper. I gave him my paper, and he gave me a B on the paper or something like that. I just couldn't imagine, because I thought it was a solid paper. I went to him and talked about, tried to use all these different literary techniques and all this. So I actually had a meeting with him afterwards. And I was just talking to him, we got talking about this, that, and the other, and then he just said one sentence. He said, well, if it's really so clear that Islam is the truth, then why doesn't everyone just believe it? If it's so clear that it's true. And that one statement was enough to throw an unbewitting young college student into a turmoil for almost a year and a half. Right, almost a year and a half. One statement. People asbaha mu'mina wa amsa kafira. You wake up as a mu'min, right, and you go to sleep as a kafir. So iman is not something, particularly in this day and age, that we should take for granted. The second slide, you can think about it, it's not actually separate slides, it's like all one part. It's like one slide with 4 different lanes. So the other slide is amal salihah, that you do good deeds. If a person is thinking, how do I protect my iman? This is how you protect your iman. Right? They say the best offense is a good defense. So your good defense is by doing good deeds. A person should be kathirul khair. And there's 2 fallacies that sometimes people fall into. One fallacy that people sometimes succumb to is they think that I have a good heart. I don't need to do good deeds. Right? I don't need to do this prayer thing. I'm a good person. I love Allah. I love His Rasul. You might have love for Allah. You might have love for His Rasul. Who am I to judge? But one thing that we do know for sure is that when a certain reality exists within the heart, it finds expression on the lips. Right? You can't have a certain state within you and hide it from the rest of the world. What you are, the decisions you make, the way you think, the things that you do, that is a reflection of what your heart is. And if a person thinks that they are something other than what is going on inside here, then they're just tricking themselves. Right? A person says, I have a lot of haya. Right? I have a tremendous amount of haya. And when they say that, they mean like, a sister might be meaning like, I would never date a guy. Right? I don't do hijab, but I would never date a guy. Which is great. Right? It takes a certain amount of haya not to do that. But when haya is overflowing in the heart that you cannot contain it, it will find expression. Physically. Right? I mean, if people had the haya of Fatima radiallahu anha, she told her husband, when you take out my body after I pass away, take it out in the night so that no one can see it. She's already a person of fully covered. She's going to be completely clothed. She's already passed away, and she said, take it out in the night so no one can see me. That's what happens when it overwhelms the heart. It has. Which person, when you're parenting, and you see you have a teenager, right? It's very easy to sort of see the telltale signs that something is going on in their life, right? So they fall in love with a girl or something like that. They start acting a little bit funny. They want to hide. They can hide the numbers. They can hide all the texts. They can delete all the history. They can do all that, but they can't hide the giddiness, right? That little jump in their step that they have when they get into the house. That you can't hide, right? And if you're looking for it, you pick it up like this. If you're looking for it, you're like, I know what's going on. Or if something's bothering them, they're acting a little bit edgy. Something's going on. Something affects the heart. It has a physical manifestation. So that's the first thing, that we can't be deluded to think that there's not a reciprocal relationship there. How does this tie in with one asr, with good deeds? This is actually like the bulk of the talk. I don't know what time do we start? Like 8:30? Huh? We started at like 8:30, right? 8:20 or so? Maybe we'll stop like 9:15. We're not going to get through it. It's just, that's not what you give it. We'll get through some of it. It's been, I think the riwayat from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and it's in Bayhaqi, that when the people of Jannah will have only one regret, and their only regret will be that moment that they spend in their life that was empty of dhikr. See, time is all you have. This very set amount of time is the only commodity that you have to actually earn good deeds. And our pious predecessors were so particular about their time. Allahu Akbar Kabira. That would just be story after story after story. But we look into our lives and we see how recklessly, how blatantly, how shamelessly we completely take our life and throw it down the gutter. If a person were just to, do you know how much, the average kid watches 3 hours and 26 to 27 minutes of TV a day. If you take all the time that you spend reading the newspaper, and you take the amount of minutes, right, at the end of every, the people of taqwa, they have, there's different levels. So some people, my teacher doesn't call the cell phone a cell phone, he calls it the hell phone. Because he said after this came into existence, it seems like Shaitan just went on vacation. Because it's really sad. You see so many people are getting into illegitimate relationships. Good people, not the people who are off the deep end, but regular people that just, Shaitan takes you and then they end up, I just had a recent case that came up, and it's just very sad how people sort of fall off the cliff and they start flirting and one thing leads to another, and then you're lonely and this person gives you attention, and you're like, my husband doesn't do that, and then one thing leads to another, and before you know it, it's really sad. So sometimes people don't use the phone for that, right? Some people, they start talking, and my teacher would say there's only so long that person can talk before they end up saying something wrong, right? Man samata najah. We know that whoever speaks, whoever keeps silent, they've been saved, they've been rescued. There's you look at a couple of guys who sit together. Hey man, what's going on? Nothing much, bro. What you doing? Nothing. How was your day? Same old, same old. And after like 1 or 2 minutes, you have nothing to say, right? Because you talked about everything yesterday, and whatever happened yesterday, since yesterday till today, nothing really changed. And then you see the same person the next day. There's nothing really to talk about, right? You're sort of exhausted everything that's happened. And then you start pulling, but the nafs loves to talk, right? So then you start pulling, there's only after a certain amount of time before you start talking about things that you shouldn't be talking about. But I'll tell you, there's people who don't even do that. And maybe you use phones for completely responsible reasons, for completely good purposes. There's still individuals who actually look at the phone, and at the end of the month, when they see how many minutes they actually spend talking, even to people who is completely permissible for them to talk to, for example, their own family or their own mother, they feel bad because they said that was how much time I could have spent conversing with Allah. Right? And that is a source of regret for them. That's a source of their istighfar. That I spent so much time, 1,000 minutes, that 1,000 minutes I could have been spending, alhamdulillah. People go over on their minutes, right? They have 1,000 minutes, they have 2,000 minutes, they have to get unlimited plans even though they don't want to spend $150 or $200 a month. Like there's no way, because we go over month after month and we can't afford the overages, so they have to pay for it. And that's a completely lost opportunity. There's a story of one of our pious predecessors. So his students, or people used to notice that he used to eat wheat, but he used to eat the wheat raw. Right? He would just take it in. And people were somewhat perplexed. They said, no, Hazrat, if you put some water and mix it with it, at least, it will go down a little bit easy. And he said that I calculated the time that it takes to mix the water and prepare it and take it in. It doesn't take, he said, that much time I can do this much extra zikr. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my time. I remember our Shaykh al-Hadith who teaches Bukhari. Allahu Akbar. Talk about valuing time. He would teach us Dars Bukhari, right? He would go through the class, then he would sit in the class and he's waiting for the next teacher to come. Sometimes the teacher's running a little bit late. He wouldn't just sit there waiting for the next teacher to come or look over the next day's thing. He would get off, like for example, here's where his takhat is where he gave the dars. He would sit down, he would turn around, and he would start offering his nafil salah until the next teacher came, and then he would leave. This was a person who teaches hadith the whole week, and every week, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls him to the haram. Right? I remember when we had gone to the haram recently, I took a wrong turn. Not a wrong turn, my daughter was like, Mama, I want to see that toy, and I went to go see that toy, and I turned around, and someone said, Moli Sahab. I turned around, and there he was, right, in the haram. Right? This was a person, one time he was, I think, in some African country, and there was too much of a layover, maybe a 24-hour layover or something like that. His flight was delayed. So he chartered a flight, or he got a flight, he flew to the haram, right, he made Umrah. Then he got a cab driver, he said, drive me to Medina. And the guy's like, I'm too tired. He said, I'll drive you. He got him in the car, he drove to Medina, he did ziyarah, he came back to Makkah, he did another Umrah, he flew back and he got his flight out to wherever he had to go to. Right? These were people who really valued their time. They saw, my own teacher, I would see him, subhanAllah, work so much for the deen. You see him work so much, like Dars Hazrat, you need to take some rest. And sometimes students would actually go to him and they say, Hazrat, just take some rest, sleep for a little while. And he said, don't worry, we'll rest in the grave. I can remember, I haven't spent much time with him, but the amount of time, the times that I can remember when I was sitting with him, he would sit with me, he was literally about to fall off. Right? He'd keep a smile on his face, he'd try to be very congenial, but you could tell that he was pushing himself, right? And I had prepared this whole list of things to discuss, and there's this issue to discuss, and this, and how do you treat with these problems in society, and this and that. And I would just look at him and I was like, wow. It's no, you want to give him rest, but then even when he's done with you, he's going on to the next person, and it's the next person, and then it's the next person, and it's the next person. And touching people's lives one by one, that's what it means to value your time. To take value of every single moment. And don't deem any action to be small. Right? It's not like you have to pray 200 rakat nafils. Whatever you're doing in your life, just get the best out of it. If you're walking around, just smile. Right? Just smile. Smile more. You'll feel better. They say it takes more muscles to frown than it takes to smile. Right? People who study anatomy maybe can, corroborate that or not. But subhanAllah, just smiling, right? This is sadaqah. Like, don't miss it. We know from hadith, and the hadith is replete with examples trying to motivate people to always be in kathirul khairat, right? Just always trying to do good things as much as possible. Don't lose an opportunity to do good. Right? Like, protect yourself from the fire, even if it be what? Like a date seed, right? Or even with a shoelace. Right? You just whatever you can do, try to protect yourself from the hellfire. One of our akabir, one time they had some meal at his house, and so people generally would eat on the ground. And they would spread the dust out. And he said that the person said, Hazrat, can I clean up the duster? And he said, yeah. He said, do you know how to do it? He said, yeah, I know how to clean the duster. So he cleaned up the duster. And the duster is like the tablecloth that they put on the floor that you eat on. So he cleaned it up and he was about to get ready. He said, what are you doing? He said, you don't know how to take care of it. And so what he did is he gathered all the crumbs, right? He gathered, like there's maybe watermelon peels or something. He took those and he gave those to certain animals. And he took all the crumbs and he gave those to the ants. And he said, look, in this one action that you were just to throw it away, how many good deeds you've passed on. Right? That you were able to benefit even the ants on the face of the earth. Right? Our pious predecessors, they didn't see any action as small. Any action is small. And the best actions are those that are most consistent, even if they وَإِن قَلَّ even if they be مَا دَامَ وَإِن قَلَّ أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, even if they be little. If you want to do a lot of good deeds, we'll stop in 10 minutes. You want to do a lot of good deeds. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to have to value your time, right? And value it significantly. They say that if you ever want to know what the value of 1 year is, ask someone who, they say, but you can say, ask someone who failed his oral exam, right? And they have to repeat that year, right? And they're like 3 credits away from graduating. And it sets them like 1 whole year off cycle, and now they have to take the MCATs late and they can't apply. And they're like, man, just 1 class, right? 1 class that I could have the entire year of their life is gone. And they say, if you want to know the value of 1 month, ask a mother who gave birth to her child a month early, right? And you see those kids in the ICU, right? They're like in these little incubators, and it's just subhanAllah. 1 month, right? And then their lungs would have been making a surfactant that it could support the lung. And like the mortality after you get, I think, like at least when I was back in that school, like I think at 30 or 31 weeks, it's not very different after that point from, if a woman delivers at term. But if it's before that, it's critical. Right now it's critical. And if you want to know the value of like maybe a minute, right, ask the person who's missed the train. It's happened to me before. Right? You're catching the Amtrak to go to Chicago. You're there, you're getting your ticket, and you see the train leaving in front of your eyes. There's nothing you can do to bring it back. Right? If you want to know the value of like even a millisecond, ask the person who won a silver medal in the Olympics. They put 20 years of their life training, and they lost it by a millisecond. Right? Time has value, and then once you start to value time, when you start to see time as something that is important, then it becomes automatic that you start to make use of it. Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he said that al-waqtu sayfun illam taqta bihi tuqta, aw kama qala, that he said that time is a sword. If you don't cut with it, it will cut you. And so the best thing that a person can do is to be busy. And this is the other thing that really busy in doing good deeds. And this is the other thing that sometimes people really fall off the wagon with, is that laziness. And this is one of the things that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually sought refuge from min al-hammi wal-huzni was'ul harami wal-kasr, that's not the exact wording, but one of the things that he sought refuge from was from kasr, from laziness. Right? That person should have nashat, person should have energy. No, I'll tell you, I worked with this one attending at the University of Chicago on one of these medical review products that's sort of, has gone viral across the nation. It's one of the top review materials that they have for the USMLE. And I mean, that phase of my life was just, it was like a blur. It was like a whirlwind. And we were working, I mean, he was attending, I was a resident, I was taking my boards, I'm worried about boards, but it was just like nonstop. It was to the extent that his wife delivered in the other room, like minutes ago, right? And he would come to the room, he said, let's go, we have a meeting, right? And we'd be going and editing, right? I mean, it was days, nights, just like it was just like nonstop. And I didn't know, like you think that you're hardworking, I didn't know what the meaning of hard work is until I saw him the way that he worked. And he said that when he went with his teacher, I asked him after he came back, how was it? He said, it sounds sort of bad that I'm saying this, but I'm sort of glad to be back, right? And he's young, he's like in his 30s or maybe like early 40s, and his teacher's in his 60s. So he said, I feel sort of bad, but I was saying this, but I'm sort of glad to be back. And I was like, why? And he said that it was hard to keep up with him because he was just going at he had so much energy, right? So much, there's just trying to keep up with him, you just burn yourself out, right? And you see that with, Rasulullah in the nights he's in ibadah, in the days he's in the service of mankind. When did this man rest? He sacrificed everything for the ummah. And these are two things that, the stark reality is like most people who are both speaking this and who are listening to this may never, achieve those ideals of working that hard. One of the things that we have completely in our hands, is making use of our free time, right? And so maybe that's a good message to end off on. That نعمتان مغبون في كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ كما قال, that there are two ni'mas that most people are completely ripped off, and everyone hates to get ripped off. I remember before I was going to South Africa, we had saved for so long, right? We were saving, scrounging pennies to go, and then we're like 6 months before going, and I had this one car, we had a whole slew of cars, malfunction after malfunction, and I saw a Camry, right? And I think the Camry was selling for $2,000 or $3,000, which is a big thing for us at that time because you're still a med student and you don't have much money to your name. And the idea was, okay, I have 6 months, I'll buy a car, it'll carry me at least 6 months, I don't have to worry about car repairs or something like that, and then when we're leaving, I'll leave it with someone and they'll sell it off. And what happened is, so I bought the car, and the second or third day I found out it was a lemon, right? The engine was gone. And it really hurt because those are $3,000 that you really worked for, really sacrificed for, and now that's how are you going to go? Alhamdulillah, and then he made a way. But you hate getting ripped off, right? It hurts. But people get ripped off all the time, and they particularly get ripped off when it comes to two things: your health and then your free time. So, in the spirit of also just look into your life and see what you're doing with your time, right? And the things that don't matter, they really don't matter, right? Just cut them out, right? People say that I don't have time for Salah, and people say I don't have time to study, and people say I don't have time for Quran, and people say I don't have time for Deen, and people say that I don't have time for Allah, right? Cut out these. When I had emailed my teacher with a schedule, right? I don't think he even looked at the schedule. He said, just cut out all the things that you don't need in your life, your schedule will fall into place. And that's the reality of it. If you look into your life and you see all the things that a person is doing that you don't need to do, right? You don't need to do, cut those things off and see how radically transformed your life is. Radically transformed. You will see, and I'll end with the story or anecdote. A person, so we've had etikaf for, year after year after year. This etikaf this year, at least in Chicago, was a little bit unique in which there were certain ground rules. And one of the ground rules was that you couldn't bring a cell phone. Right? You couldn't bring your cell phone into the etikaf. So it's sort of weird, right? Because that's your lifeline. It's like a pacemaker. Like you get up and like you don't feel it, you're like, what's going on? You can't leave the house without it. It's just like death. So people have to like leave it in a bin. When you enter into a masjid, you can't have a cell phone. But by the time that people were a couple of days into it, right, people didn't want it back. Right? They felt like people who are shackled, and you like take off the shackles, the way when you feel really free, it feels good. Right? It feels really good. And if you take off the shackles of the things which are meaningless, the things which are dead weight, the things which are distractions, the things that are standing as obstacles between you and Allah in your life, then immediately you will find yourself with opportunities, with venues, with avenues to create a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's really sort of the purview of this weekend, is how do you create a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the first take-home message is just value your time. Right? Just value your time. The advice is to me first and foremost, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us amongst those who are able to value their time, who are able to get on the right slides and slide off this plane that is crashing, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immortalize us amongst the people of Jannah. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.